Part 1. In Chapter 1, physicist Elma York and her husband Nathaniel are vacationing in a mountain cabin when a blinding light fills the sky. Initially fearing a nuclear attack, they soon realize it was likely a meteor strike. Moments later, an earthquake destroys their cabin, forcing them to escape through the wreckage. Using their scientific knowledge, they calculate that the explosion occurred hundreds of miles away and brace for an incoming air blast. As they take shelter in their car, fiery debris begins falling from the sky. When the radio finally breaks its silence, Edward R. Murrow reports that a massive meteor has struck off the coast of Maryland, obliterating Washington, D.C., and causing devastating earthquakes and tidal waves along the eastern seaboard. The president's fate is unknown, and the reporter confirms that nothing remains of the U.S. Capitol, marking the beginning of a global catastrophe. In Chapter 2, Elma and Nathaniel struggle to process the destruction after hearing confirmation that a meteor struck near Washington, D.C., with a force greater than any atomic bomb. Elma realizes her parents in D.C. and her grandmother in Charleston are likely dead, as tidal waves and firestorms devastate the East Coast. Moments later, the air blast reaches them, shattering the car and damaging their hearing. With roads blocked by fallen trees, they abandon the vehicle and begin a grueling 2-mile hike to the airfield, hoping their plane is still intact. Along the way, they encounter horrific signs of destruction, including a severed arm, grim proof of the disaster's human toll. After 4 exhausting hours, they finally reach the airstrip to find massive damage, but their hangar still standing. However, they discover Mr. Goldman, the property owner, dead in his truck, a victim of the blast's unimaginable power. In Chapter 3, Elma and Nathaniel manage to get their small Cessna airborne and survey the devastation. Seeing the East Coast reduced to fire and ash, Elma turns the plane west. They contact 2 Air Force pilots, Major Eugene Lindholm and his wingman, who escort them toward Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Mid-flight, a piece of falling debris destroys part of their propeller, forcing Elma to glide and execute an emergency landing in a snow-covered field. Safely on the ground, they're taken to the base, fed, and debriefed. Elma calls her brother in California but cannot get through. Soon after, they meet Colonel Stetson Parker, Elma's unpleasant former superior, who assumes command after the government's destruction. Parker insists Nathaniel join a classified meeting, believing the Russians might exploit the disaster. Elma, excluded despite her wartime expertise as a pilot, seethes at being dismissed but resolves to stay composed and useful. In Chapter 4, Elma stays with Major Lindholm's family while Nathaniel attends military meetings. Exhausted and grieving, she is warmly welcomed by Mrs. Lindholm, who offers her a bath, food, and kindness. On the television, Elma witnesses the horrifying aftermath of the meteor strike, Washington, D.C. completely gone, hundreds of thousands dead or homeless, and the eastern seaboard submerged under steaming ocean water. The scope of destruction finally sinks in. Mrs. Lindholm comforts her and prepares dinner, showing domestic calm amid global catastrophe. Elma manages to call her brother Herschel in California, confirming that she and Nathaniel survived, but that their parents likely perished in D.C. He reports Charleston was hit by tidal waves, and their grandmother's fate remains unknown. After the call, Elma sits numbly in the quiet kitchen, surrounded by ordinary domestic sounds, realizing how lucky she is to be alive, and how completely their world has changed. In Chapter 5, Elma awakens at the Lindholm home after a night of rest to find Nathaniel finally returned from his late meeting. Exhausted and bruised, he reveals that Colonel Parker still suspects Russian involvement, but that General Eisenhower is returning to take command. The next morning, both Elma and Nathaniel struggle with pain from the previous day's trauma. Over breakfast with the Lindholms, they try to maintain normalcy amid news reports showing New York City submerged and the East Coast in ruins. While Nathaniel returns to the base, Elma reluctantly joins Mrs. Lindholm for a shopping trip in Dayton, where life continues eerily as usual. At the store, townspeople react with curiosity and pity when they learn Elma is a survivor from the East. Overwhelmed by grief but inspired by Mrs. Lindholm's plan to volunteer, Elma resolves to help with refugee relief efforts, determined to find purpose amid catastrophe. In Chapter 6, Elma, determined to contribute, goes to Wright-Patterson HQ to volunteer but faces dismissal from Colonel Parker, who insists flying isn't a place for a lady. Rebuffed, she joins Mrs. Lindholm at the base hospital, distributing drinks and helping care for waves of refugees suffering burns, injuries, and shock. While assisting, Elma meets a former Citadel professor who confirms Charleston's destruction, forcing her to confront the loss of her family. Later, she visits a synagogue to begin mourning, meeting another survivor and recognizing their shared perseverance. At home, she sits Shiva quietly, performing Kriya and mourning with Nathaniel. When the week ends, she searches for ways to help, calling mechanics to repair her plane, but finds none available. Volunteering daily, she still feels purposeless until Nathaniel asks her to calculate the meteor's size, an intellectual task that reignites her sense of purpose and belonging. In Chapter 7, Elma balances days helping refugees with nights spent calculating the meteor's size and impact for Nathaniel. Seeking comfort in logic, she works tirelessly through data, even consulting her brother, Herschel, at the U.S. Weather Bureau to confirm heat, water displacement, and atmospheric effects. Together, they realize the impact released unimaginable energy, heating the Chesapeake Bay to over 500 degrees and likely altering global weather. Meanwhile, Elma overhears Myrtle and Eugene lament that black refugees are being ignored by rescue efforts, revealing deep racial inequities in disaster response. Later, Elma rechecks her math and feels something is terribly wrong. Her figures suggest the meteor's effects are far greater than expected. When Nathaniel returns late from work, she shows him her results. Her voice trembling, she explains that the meteor's power wasn't just catastrophic, it may mark an extinction-level event threatening all life on Earth. In Chapter 8, Nathaniel verifies Elma's meteor calculations and confirms her terrifying conclusion: the strike will cause massive global cooling followed by devastating warming, threatening all life on Earth. Determined to act, he arranges a meeting with General Eisenhower, but Elma, paralyzed by her fear of public speaking and memories of past ridicule, feigns illness to avoid going. Nathaniel presents her report alone, while Elma stays behind with Myrtle Lindholm, who reveals plans to use Elma's damaged plane to aid black communities being ignored in relief efforts. Later, when Nathaniel returns, Elma helps prepare dinner as he explains that Eisenhower dismissed the long-term climate risks since they lacked military significance. Though Eisenhower accepted that the meteor wasn't a Soviet weapon, Elma realizes their warnings about global catastrophe are being ignored. She resolves that next time, she must go herself, no matter her fear, because humanity's survival may depend on it. In Chapter 9, Elma continues volunteering at the refugee hospital as survivors keep arriving a month after the meteor strike. When a plane finally brings black refugees, Myrtle reveals she and Eugene used Elma's plane to drop flyers over segregated neighborhoods, guiding people to safety. 2 weeks later, Elma joins Nathaniel at a critical White House meeting with Acting President Brannan, UN officials, and military leaders to present their findings on the meteor's long-term effects. Overcoming her fear, Elma helps explain that the meteor's steam-filled atmosphere will trigger global cooling followed by catastrophic warming, ultimately leading to boiling oceans and mass extinction. Many officials dismiss the warning, focusing instead on short-term farming issues, but Brannan recognizes the gravity of their calculations. After hearing the data, UN Representative M. Scherzinger proposes humanity's only long-term solution: to begin planning for colonization beyond Earth. Part 2. In Chapter 10, 4 years after the meteor strike, Elma works for the International Aerospace Coalition at Sunflower Mission Control in Kansas. Earth is still suffering from the meteor winters, and global famine threatens areas like Ukraine. Now part of the IAC, Elma and her colleague Helen Liu calculate and verify data for the first manned space launch with Stetson Parker piloting the Jupiter rocket. The tense operation succeeds. Parker becomes the first human in orbit, marking humanity's first step towards space colonization. After the mission, Nathaniel and Elma reunite at their small Kansas City apartment, celebrating both the launch's success and a new opportunity: the expansion of the Astronaut program. Nathaniel reveals he has already submitted Elma's application, as the test pilot requirement has been lifted. The chapter ends with renewed hope, humanity's future now reaching beyond Earth, and Elma finally closer to her lifelong dream of spaceflight. In Chapter 11, on the 4th anniversary of the meteor strike, Elma reflects during a synagogue memorial before returning to work at the International Aerospace Coalition, now preparing for large-scale lunar missions. Despite her flight experience and mathematical skill, Elma learns she didn't make the first astronaut cut, because Director Clemens rejected all female candidates, claiming space travel was too dangerous for women. Furious but determined, Elma vents to her husband Nathaniel and later meets with her fellow female pilots from the 99S Flight Club, including Helen, Myrtle, Betty, and Basira. Together they confirm that no women were chosen for the astronaut corps. Betty, a reporter, plans to expose the discrimination publicly by questioning the all-male selection at the upcoming press conference. As Elma takes her friends flying, they vow to prove women are equally capable. She proposes organizing an all-women air show, her first step toward reclaiming space for women. In Chapter 12, public backlash grows after the IAC announces an all-male astronaut corps. During the press conference, Director Clemens dismisses concerns, claiming space exploration is too dangerous for women. Outraged, Elma launches Operation Ladies First, meeting Clemens privately to advocate for trained female pilots like the Wasps. He refuses, arguing that a woman's death would end the entire program. Frustrated but undeterred, Elma and her colleagues continue their demanding calculations for upcoming lunar and orbital missions, while political tensions rise over funding and Cold War fears. Nathaniel struggles with Stetson Parker's growing influence and political posturing within the IAC. Later, at home, Elma receives an invitation from Senator Kenneth Worgan and his wife Nicole, a former WASP pilot, to attend a dinner. Seeing an opportunity to gain political support for women in space, Elma accepts, planning to use the evening to further her cause for gender inclusion in the program. In Chapter 13, Elma and Nathaniel attend Senator and Nicole Worgan's dinner party, where Nicole, also a former WASP pilot, shares war stories to draw in the crowd. When Elma recounts her own combat experience, Colonel Stetson Parker publicly belittles her, claiming women are unfit for dangerous missions. Elma and Nicole humiliate him with wit, winning the crowd's sympathy and securing Nicole's agreement to join the upcoming women's air show to promote female pilots. Later, at a rocket test, Elma witnesses an explosion and fends off unwanted advances from engineer Leroy Pluckett. During a bowling outing with friends, Elma worries her air show won't impress without military aircraft. Eugene then surprises her by offering 6 Mustang fighter planes from his air club, giving the project the credibility it needs. With new aircraft, allies, and determination, Elma's dream of proving women's place in space begins to take real flight. In Chapter 14, Elma meets with the Kansas City Negro Aeronautics Club to recruit pilots for her women's air show, hoping to prove that women, and especially women of color, deserve a place in the space program. While some members, like Ida Peaks and Imogen Braggs, agree to join, Sarah Coleman refuses, accusing Elma of exploitation and racial blindness. Humbled, Elma apologizes and earns tentative trust from the group. With support from Nicole Worgan and several famed international pilots, the event draws huge publicity, including Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in attendance. During the air show, Elma's Mustang suffers a bird strike mid-flight, sending her into a deadly tailspin. Using her WASP training, she regains control and lands safely, astonishing spectators. The media swarms her, and Elma uses the moment to advocate for women astronauts. Though hailed as a hero, she later hides from reporters, shaken by the overwhelming attention. In Chapter 15, the success of the Women's International Air Show earns national praise, with Ida Peaks recognized for leading the formation flight and Elma for her skill during the bird strike incident. The pilots celebrate at Helen's home, joined by Betty, Pearl, Imogen, and Turkish pilot Sabiha Gökhan, discussing future shows and media opportunities. Betty proposes securing televised coverage or a guest spot on the Dinah Shore show to keep momentum for women astronauts, but Elma resists public attention. Back at the IAC, Elma receives an unexpected call from Don Herbert, Mr. Wizard, inviting her to appear on his popular science show after his producer's daughter was inspired by her flight. Terrified of public speaking, Elma panics but pretends to consider it. Weeks later, friends like Myrtle encourage her to accept, arguing it would advance their cause, while Elma battles deep anxiety about fame and visibility despite growing public admiration. In Chapter 16, Elma battles crippling stage fright before appearing on Watch Mr. Wizard, struggling with memories of past ridicule but determined to succeed. On live television, she joins Don Herbert to explain aerodynamics in flight to a young girl, performing calmly despite her terror. The appearance makes her a national sensation. Returning home, Elma is recognized by neighbors and receives a congratulatory call from her brother Herschel, who praises her and tells her how proud their late parents would be. Speaking with her niece Rachel, Elma is moved when the girl declares she wants to be an astronaut like her aunt, inspiring Elma to promise that someday they'll go to Mars together. The call ends warmly, but Elma later discovers she forgot to pay their electric bill amid her new fame. Feeling guilty, she vows to regain control as Nathaniel reassures her that all that matters is that she's home. In Chapter 17, Elma and Nathaniel return from synagogue to find a large envelope from NBC, fan mail from children inspired by her Mr. Wizard appearance. Among the letters is one from a girl who dreams of being a laddie astronaut, so moving Elma deeply as she realizes her influence on young girls. Nathaniel discusses skipping a stage in the lunar mission plan, but Elma insists safety and testing must come before speed. Later, during a tense rocket launch delay, Elma works alongside Helen, Nathaniel, and Colonel Parker in the ISC control room. Parker mockingly tells her a group of Girl Scouts named themselves the Lady Astronaut Club and want her to speak to them. Elma agrees despite his condescension. As the countdown issues are resolved, Nathaniel's team fixes the cutoff system and the mission proceeds successfully, further cementing Elma's growing reputation as both a scientist and a symbol for aspiring female astronauts. In Chapter 18, Elma reluctantly attends a Girl Scout event with Betty to comfort astronaut Jean-Paul Labourgeois' daughter Claire while he's in orbit. Betty secretly arranges reporters, ambushing Elma into a public appearance. Despite her fear and anger, Elma endures the attention to reassure Claire and the other girls. 2 weeks later, the astronauts return safely, proving their lunar module viable for extended missions. Back at the IAC, Elma helps analyze new rocket data with engineer Bubbles Bubiensky, while balancing exhaustion and fame from her growing public role. Later, Nathaniel angrily reveals that Director Clemens told him to control your wife after her media coverage drew political pressure to include women in the program. The confrontation triggers Elma's anxiety attack and she breaks down. Nathaniel comforts her, assuring her she's done nothing wrong. To calm her, he asks for her help on lunar calculations, grounding her in familiar work. In Chapter 19, Elma recovers from her breakdown by working through complex rocket equations, regaining calm and focus. Nathaniel gently confronts her, asking if she's pregnant due to her frequent vomiting, but she clarifies it's anxiety, not illness. She opens up about her long history of panic attacks and fear of public scrutiny, rooted in childhood pressure to be perfect and past academic trauma. Nathaniel reassures her, revealing that even President Brannon's daughter now dreams of becoming a lady astronaut because of her. Deeply moved, Elma weeps with relief and pride. Concerned for her health, Nathaniel arranges a doctor visit where she's diagnosed with anxiety and prescribed Miltown, which she refuses to take. As they leave, Nathaniel suggests turning their upcoming California trip into a short vacation. However, they encounter a mob of reporters and police activity nearby, hinting at growing public tension surrounding the space program. In Chapter 20, food riots erupt across Kansas City, intensifying public anxiety amid worsening shortages. Elma and Nathaniel remain safe at home, where Elma speaks with her brother Herschel, who invites her to California early for her nephew's bar mitzvah, reminding her of how few family members they have left after the meteor and the Holocaust. Days later, the IAC prepares for a major milestone, the first unmanned lunar flyby. Elma, Helen, Myrtle, and Eugene gather in a secondary control room to watch the transmission. As the first grainy images of the moon appear, Nathaniel's voice announces the success of the Friendship probe, and the team celebrates joyously. The event reignites Elma's determination to reach space herself. Later, while running new rocket simulations, she receives another invitation to appear on Mr. Wizard. Torn between comfort and courage, she resolves to say yes, realizing young girls now see her as proof that women can go to the moon. In Chapter 21, Elma and Nathaniel travel to Chicago for her second Mr. Wizard appearance. They spend the day sightseeing, running into Elma's childhood neighbor, Lynn, which reminds her how different her life has become. On the boat tour, a debate breaks out when Lynn's husband criticizes the space program, forcing Elma to defend its purpose before diffusing the tension. The next day, Nathaniel accompanies her to the television studio, drawing attention as a fellow scientist so Elma can relax before her live segment. During the show, she confidently demonstrates a bottle rocket experiment with Don Herbert and the young actress Rita, inspiring viewers once again. When filming ends, Don praises her on-air presence and suggests she could host a science program. Exhausted but proud, Elma hides her lingering anxiety attacks. Moments later, Dawn urgently returns. Nathaniel has received devastating news. A rocket has exploded. In Chapter 22, Elma learns that a Jupiter-class rocket has exploded mid-flight, its boosters separating too early and crashing into a Kansas farm. Nathaniel, devastated, takes the call from the IAC and insists they return immediately to Kansas City. From their plane, they see the massive plume of smoke rising from the burning fields below, children among the victims. Racked with guilt as lead engineer, Nathaniel blames himself, though Elma reminds him it wasn't his fault. Upon arrival, the IAC is in shock, and tension grows when Parker confronts Elma about the danger astronauts face. As investigations begin, Nathaniel refuses rest, staying overnight at Mission Control to review telemetry and determine why the safety destruct failed. With the moon launch delayed and the program grounded, Nathaniel admits he must remain for months. Elma agrees to attend her nephew's bar mitzvah alone, providing him space to recover from the tragedy. In Chapter 23, Elma travels alone to California for her nephew Tommy's bar mitzvah, while Nathaniel remains behind for the Jupiter explosion inquiry, which investigators determine was caused by a programming transcription error that killed 11 people. Elma takes a commercial flight, the first of her life, and reunites joyfully with her brother Herschel, his wife Doris, and their children. Rachel shyly reveals she's founded a Lady Astronaut Club, inspired by Elma's public persona. During Tommy's ceremony, Elma reflects on gender inequality and the barriers she faced as a girl. At the celebration, she and Herschel discuss climate projections following the meteor. The Earth will permanently heat, though it may remain habitable if greenhouse gases are limited. Their talk turns personal when Herschel gently confronts her about her anxiety, and Elma admits to recurring panic and a past suicide attempt at Stanford, a trauma Nathaniel still doesn't fully know. In Chapter 24, Elma accompanies Nathaniel to Washington for the congressional inquiry into the Orion 27 rocket crash. During the hearings, Senator Mason challenges the IAC's competence, forcing Nathaniel to explain that a missing superscript caused the explosion that killed 11 people. Though Elma was prepared to clarify the math, Nathaniel shields her from testifying after seeing her anxiety. At lunch, Senator Worgan's wife Nicole urges Elma to testify as the Lady Astronaut to defend the program's future and admits she once struggled with similar anxiety after the meteor. Nicole recommends her own doctor, Dr. Haddad. Realizing she can't keep suffering through public appearances, Elma secretly visits the doctor without telling Nathaniel, ashamed of her weakness. To her relief, Dr. Haddad is compassionate, offers therapy and medication, and helps Elma finally confront her debilitating panic. Overwhelmed but hopeful, Elma breaks down, beginning her path toward recovery. In Chapter 25, Elma takes her first dose of Milltown, anxious yet desperate to manage her panic before testifying at the congressional hearings. The medication steadies her nerves, allowing her to feel calm and focused. That night, she confides in Nathaniel that she's been secretly seeing a therapist. He's relieved and supportive, encouraging her honesty. As they talk, Nathaniel reveals his recurring nightmares about the rocket crash, and together they decide Elma should testify before Congress to defend the space program. When she does, the tranquilizer helps her remain composed, as she clearly explains the transcription error that caused the Jupiter disaster, impressing the committee and silencing Senator Mason's criticism. Weeks later, Elma meets with Director Clemens, Parker, and Werner von Braun to argue that including women in spaceflight will strengthen the program's future. Despite her discomfort with von Braun's Nazi past, she presses on, successfully making her case. In Chapter 26, following congressional reforms, the IAC mandates unmanned test launches to ensure safety after the Orion disaster. Once successful, a manned mission follows, but during countdown, the launch halts. An armed protester has strapped himself to the gantry, claiming space travel defies God's will. Parker quietly alerts Elma, asking her to escort the astronauts' families away without causing panic. Hours later, the bomber is killed, and the astronauts evacuated safely. Afterwards, Parker thanks Elma, but spitefully vows she'll never go to space, blaming her past harassment report. That night, Nathaniel and Elma discuss relocating the launch site for safety, which later becomes official. Operations will move to Brazil for better security and equatorial trajectory advantages. Months later, the IAC issues a groundbreaking press release. Women are now invited to apply for astronaut training. Elma celebrates triumphantly with her colleagues, realizing her dream is finally within reach. In Chapter 27, Elma visits the 99's hangar for the first time in months, bringing astronaut applications for the newly opened women's program. The female pilots react with excitement and frustration. The requirements demand advanced degrees and extensive jet experience, which few women possess, effectively excluding most. Imogen points out that the restrictions also prevent women of color from qualifying, exposing the program's hidden bias. Elma promises to speak with Nathaniel to advocate for fairer standards. During the meeting, Betty gives Elma a letter originally sent to Life magazine, correspondence from a nursing home claiming that Elma's Aunt Esther, long thought dead after the meteor, is alive in South Carolina. Overwhelmed, Elma breaks down as her friends comfort her. Later, she calls the nursing home and finally speaks to Aunt Esther, learning that her grandmother Rose had also survived the meteor. The conversation rekindles Elma's hope and family connection. In Chapter 28, Elma and Nathaniel discuss moving Aunt Esther from her nursing home, but financial limits and their uncertain future with the IAC's relocation to Brazil complicate the decision. Weeks later, Elma learns she's been selected for the first round of astronaut testing, though it conflicts with plans to visit Aunt Esther. Herschel offers to handle the trip, insisting she must pursue her dream. Elma, nervous but thrilled, begins preparing while keeping the news quiet at work. When she attends the 99's meeting, tensions rise as only some women, Elma, Nicole, and Betty, are accepted, while Helen, Ida, and Imogen are rejected, largely due to unfair requirements excluding women without jet experience and effectively limiting non-white applicants. Determined to fight back, Helen and the others plan to train harder and expose the discrimination through the press. Elma promises to help provide the selection list, aligning herself with their cause. In Chapter 29, Elma assists with new rocket engine calculations, proving a two-stage design can reach orbit, marking major progress for lunar missions. Later, she secretly tries to access the astronaut candidate list for Ida and the others, but learns it's in Stetson Parker's office, too risky to retrieve. Soon, she reports for astronaut testing at Fort Leavenworth, where only 34 women remain. As she waits in line, Elma notes that nearly all candidates are white, with Maggie G the only woman of color. The tests begin with medical exams, eliminating those who faint or show health issues, including Maggie, supposedly for a heart murmur. On the second day, Elma undergoes extreme physical and psychological endurance trials, freezing inner ear disorientation, inversion, treadmill stress, and written orbital mechanics tests. Despite exhaustion, she performs well, surviving each phase as other women drop out, proving her resilience and determination to reach space. In Chapter 30, only 21 women remain in astronaut testing, including Elma, Nicole, and Betty. During her interview, Elma faces Director Clemens, Dr. Benkowski, and Stetson Parker. Parker challenges her to explain why she personally wants to be an astronaut, forcing Elma to admit her deep, lifelong passion for flight and exploration. Her technical expertise impresses the panel, and even Parker seems to acknowledge her capability. After completing 5 grueling days of physical and psychological tests, Elma meets Herschel, Nathaniel, and Aunt Esther at dinner. Reunited, she learns how Aunt Esther and their grandmother survived the meteor by sheltering in a church steeple. Elma is moved by the story and briefly meets 2 young girls inspired by her as the Lady Astronaut. The evening ends warmly with laughter, family bonding, and a toast, l'chaim to life, as Elma and Nathaniel later celebrate her endurance and hope for selection. In Chapter 31, Elma attends synagogue with her family and Aunt Esther, overwhelmed by memories of her lost parents, but grateful for her aunt's return. That evening, they gather to watch a rocket launch to the orbital platform. The sight fills Aunt Esther with awe, and she finally understands Elma's dream, telling her she must go to space. Back at work, Elma delivers trajectory data for the new Sirius rocket and unexpectedly finds Stetson Parker struggling with a mysterious leg weakness. He begs her not to report it, fearing he'll be grounded. Later, during the Sirius launch event, Clemens publicly announces that Elma York has been selected as one of the new astronauts. Though Parker mocks her as a publicity stunt, Elma vows to prove herself worthy. Mission Control erupts in celebration as Nathaniel proudly embraces her. Yet Elma's joy is tempered by knowing Helen didn't make the cut, and she resolves to change that. In Chapter 32, Elma's selection as an astronaut brings overwhelming media attention. Reporters swarm her home, forcing her and Nathaniel to hide in a hotel. The IAC instructs her to avoid the facility and accepts her resignation from the computing team, leaving her isolated. Soon, Elma joins 6 other women, Nicole, Betty, Sabiha Gökçen, Violette Labourgeois, and others, as the first female astronaut candidates. Clemens and Parker introduce them to public relations staff who dictate how they must present themselves, including appearance coaching and pre-approved answers. The women are told they are not yet astronauts but ASCANs, until they reach 50 miles above Earth, a rule newly enforced for them. At the press conference, reporters ask sexist and trivial questions about beauty and cooking instead of science, until one journalist challenges the lack of racial diversity. Elma firmly supports inclusion, asserting that talented black women deserve a place in space. In Chapter 33, the IAC announces that Stetson Parker and Jean-Paul Labourgeois will lead Artemis 9, the first planned moon mission. Meanwhile, the newly appointed women astronaut candidates begin training, separated from the men. Elma excels in orbital mechanics but faces condescension when accused of getting help from her husband. After clarifying that she authored many of the equations herself, the instructor backs down. The women continue through pilot and physical training, including a Dilbert Dunker water escape test. Reporters arrive uninvited, turning the exercise into a spectacle, especially after the candidates are forced to wear bikinis instead of flight suits. Betty, now tied to Life magazine for publicity access, struggles through the test, while Elma insists on completing it properly, demanding the same blind conditions used for men. She executes a flawless underwater escape, proving her skill and determination despite the sexism and staged nature of the women's training. In Chapter 34, Elma studies late in the Artemis capsule simulator, struggling to memorize complex procedures and endless acronyms. Nathaniel finds her and encourages her to take a break, discussing ongoing debates about moving the space program to Brazil amid U.S. political resistance. At a Monday meeting, Clemens assigns training tasks. Elma is paired with Stetson Parker to test the new T-38 jet trainer. During the flight, Parker initially lectures her but soon reveals vulnerability. He confides that his leg sometimes goes numb and that he fears being grounded if the flight surgeons find out. Parker asks Elma to cover for him by using their flights as cover for secret medical visits. Elma refuses to lie, reminding him of the risk to missions and lives. The conversation ends tensely when Parker admits he knows about her Milltown prescription, hinting that he could use her secret against her. In Chapter 35, Elma confides to Nathaniel that Stetson Parker is blackmailing her after discovering her Milltown prescription. He threatens to expose her anxiety unless she helps him conceal a medical issue, his deteriorating leg. Elma explains the situation and insists Nathaniel not intervene, fearing exposure will end her astronaut career. Nathaniel struggles with anger but comforts her, urging her to keep using her medication for her health. Later, Elma joins Nicole, Helen, Jasira, Sabiha, and other women at a study session hosted by Nicole Worgan, where they discuss astronaut training and the growing political pressure to keep the space program military-focused. The women also confront the issue of discrimination, acknowledging that race, appearance, and publicity often determine selection more than merit. Elma recognizes her own privilege and uneasy ambition, realizing her frustration with injustice may partly stem from personal competitiveness. In Chapter 36, the International Aerospace Coalition faces public scrutiny after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. accuses the program of racial discrimination. During training at the Mastiff Gimbal Simulator, Elma observes Nicole mastering the device while Parker supervises. When reporters question Parker about rumors of his removal from the upcoming moon mission, he publicly confirms that a medical issue, bone spurs pressing on his spine, requires surgery. Elma confronts him privately, denying any leak of information. Parker admits the truth, but warns her to stay quiet about her anxiety medication or risk expulsion. Soon after, Clemens announces Parker's successful surgery and that Malouf will replace him on the lunar mission. The IAC plans to expand the astronaut roster, and for the first time, a woman, Jasira Paz-Viveros, is selected for a spaceflight. Though Elma celebrates her friend's achievement, she fears Parker may have quietly ensured she'll never fly. In Chapter 37, Elma shadows Capcom during a tense mission where astronauts Benkowski and Malouf can't close their capsule hatch after a spacewalk. Working alongside Nathaniel, she helps calculate a trajectory that lets them reach the Luneta station before running out of oxygen, saving their lives. Later that night, Nathaniel praises her brilliance, calling her a miracle. A month later, Parker returns after neck surgery, still smug but physically weakened. During a staff meeting, Clemens shocks everyone by assigning Elma as the new command module pilot for the first lunar mission, replacing Malouf. Parker questions the decision, hinting at Elma's use of Milltown to undermine her, but her colleagues defend her, citing her quick thinking during the crisis. Clemens affirms his confidence in her and assigns Terrazas to assist. Elma realizes she's officially going to the moon, despite Parker's attempts to ground her. In Chapter 38, Elma learns that Betty may expose her Milltown Used to Life magazine, threatening not only her own career, but all the women standing in the space program. Nicole, Jassira, and Sabiha confront Betty with Elma, who apologizes and pleads for her silence. Betty refuses at first, claiming she needs the story to protect her career, but when Elma offers to tutor her in advanced math so she can become a computer and earn a legitimate place in the program, Betty breaks down. The women comfort her, realizing they must support one another as true lady astronauts. Weeks later, before Elma's lunar mission, she and Nathaniel host a party celebrating their friends. Aunt Esther entertains everyone, and Elma learns that several women, including Helen, Ida, and Imogene, have been accepted for astronaut testing. Surrounded by her peers, Elma toasts the future. Here's to the Lady Astronaut Club. In Chapter 39, Elma York prepares for her historic lunar mission as the command module pilot aboard Artemis 9. Alongside Le Bourgeois and Terrazas, she readies for launch under Director Clemens' supervision while her family and Nathaniel watch from mission control. After suiting up, Elma reflects on the weight of the moment, the first woman going to the moon, and the isolation of her role. The crew proceeds through final checks, and Parker's voice at Capcom guides them through countdown. As the engines ignite, the rocket lifts off with tremendous force, shaking the capsule until they break through Earth's atmosphere. Elma calmly monitors instruments and confirms their successful orbit, 101.4 by 103.6 miles. With mission control's confirmation, Artemis 9 is officially in space. As Earth's blue fades into black, Elma looks out to see the stars unobscured by atmosphere, realizing the magnitude of what she's accomplished. She is on her way to the moon.